Dave, you talk about all the time about the need to have the church re-engage men.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? What do we need to do?
Yeah, well, a lot of people are calling men back to church, but the thing that we really need to do is call our churches back to men. There's been a real de-emphasizing of masculine spirituality in the last 50 to 100 years. And as a result, Christianity is the only major world religion with a gender gap of at least 20%. The average church in North America draws an adult crowd that is 61% female. No other world religion has a gender gap like that. So that's the challenge for us today. And the reason we have to solve this problem is not only because men need to know Jesus, but because churches need men. The studies are clear that when a church has engaged, growing men, the church will grow. Grow your men and your church will grow. The dying churches are 70% female. Once a church reaches 70% female participation, you can write its obituary. It ain't coming back.
Wow.
The body of Christ is men and women, and we need them both.
What have you experienced in regards to that?
Well, the same thing, and actually that's one of the reasons Dave's sitting here today. 10 years ago, was sitting in a church service, and there was a woman-led band up there singing passionate love songs to Jesus. And I prayed. I said, Lord, I can't do this anymore. This is not me. This is not how I relate. What am I going to do? Am I the problem? Because it doesn't seem to be. It's gone from when I first became a Christian, a very discipleship, action-oriented, obedience-oriented faith, to one that was now an emotional experience with, like Dave always says, me having to fall in love with a man that, I thought I knew, but if I have to fall in love with him in this romantic sense, maybe I don't know him.
The whole package that we present on Sunday morning, it's easier for a woman to relate to than a man. I mean, think about what we do on Sunday morning. We listen to a speaker, we sing songs, we hold hands, we have what I call the 4 S's: singing, sermons, sacrament, and socializing. Women are generally better at all those things. We have feminized our worship to the point we've used that David as our worship model, this highly emotive worship. This is what we want. We want this big praise-gasm, I call it. Oh, Jesus. That's what true worship is. It's not, it's this. We've said this is worship. And all you have to do is look at the mainline churches to see what happens when you do that. I mean, for 30 years, they refused to deal with the whole issue of gay ordination and gay marriage. And finally, the whole thing just exploded on them.
And the men in those churches said, I'm out of here.
The men have departed, and the Episcopal Church is down 23% in the last 10 years. They've lost 20% of their people, and they're going to be completely gone in 2050.
Right.
Because they didn't declare a winner and move on. That's what men do. Men say, this is right, this is wrong, you're in, you're out, we divide, we split, this horrible thing happens, but then one side grows and the other dies.
Right.
What a feminine response is, let's just paper over these differences in the name of unity and peace.
Right.
But the explosion always happens.
And the thing sacrificed most of the time in that is truth.
Truth.
Is objective truth, what's right, what's wrong, which men just have a natural sense of.
But truth hurts people's feelings.
Truth hurts people's feelings.
Well, I guess that's the thing is you hear people say, look, we're all about love. God is about love. Jesus loves. We are to be like Christ. We need to love. But I guess that's what's it. The definition of love has been completely tweaked and turned around to just we all need to get along.
It's a maternal love. When a mother loves her child, she loves that child unconditionally. If the child says, I'm a train, the mother says, yes, you're a train, you're a bear. It's an indulgent love. A father's love is a molding love. Studies have shown that men are much more likely to let their kids go down the high dive, or they'll let them, if they fall down, they're not immediately there to comfort their child. They say, get up, brush it off. You can, there's a need for both. Churches over time tend to maternalize. They tend to become more of that comforting. We're here to comfort, because women see the world through the lens of relationships. Men see the world through the lens of rules. Okay? You need both. But when you start seeing the world through the lens of relationships, that's when truth goes out the window. That's when we forget the gospel and we just become a social service agency. And this is what's happening in the mainline. The mainline churches, Episcopal, Methodist, Lutheran, etc., they have all these committees. They were set up 250 years ago when synods and presbyteries and all these things were really important. All these committees are dominated by grandmothers. That's why they have gone the liberal way they have, because grandma is liberal. Older women are like, Rules? Who cares? Let's love people. You know, men won't put up with that.
Because men naturally do. We don't get into the minutia of relationships. We don't get into the minutia of things.
Well, we ask questions of what?
Right.
Women ask questions of who. The question is,
Right.
what are we here to accomplish? The problem in the Episcopal Church and these feminizing churches is they're not asking questions of what. They're asking questions of who. Who do we ordain? Who do we marry? Do you know?
Who likes us, really, is what they're saying.
Yeah. Do we allow gays? Who do we allow to serve in our et cetera, right? They're all obsessed with who. Once a church starts asking who, because the answer in the Bible is whosoever, you know, that question has been answered. So I mean, and who is qualified to serve in ministry? That's answered. Who's qualified as an elder? That's answered. It's all written down. So when you start asking questions of who over and over and again, you forget about what, and your ministry spins its wheels and it gets stuck in the mud. The modern church system is designed to weed out the jock men during their childhoods, so that by the time they're 18, they don't participate in church. How do we do this? It started in Sunday school. You know, when I was a young man, the skills that you needed in Sunday school is you had to color inside the lines, you had to be able to sit quietly, you had to be able to memorize Bible verses, you had to be able to speak and articulate ideas. You put a 7-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl in a place where those are the rules, and who's going to win? The girl's going to win.
I've got 4 little boys. Yep, always.
The girls win every week in Sunday school, right? Then you get to youth group. Now, youth group used to be guy-oriented. In the 70s, every youth leader was a man. He was usually a jock. The guys just loved, he was the kind of guy you hung on, and he threw you to, he'd throw you against the wall and jam pizza in your mouth, and youth group was it was a testosterone fest, right? Now, about half of the youth leaders that are graduating from Bible college and seminary are female. And the other thing that we've seen is the rise of praise and worship in the youth group. When I was a kid, praise and worship was a couple of songs on a guitar. And then we'd get to the message, and then it was more pizza, right? But it was a big win for the guys. Right. Now, youth group is becoming a music-centric experience. 20, 30, 40 minutes of singing led by a youth praise band. So what that's doing is that's eliminating the non-musical guy. The guy who plays in the band, who loves music, who knits his own hat, he's totally into coffee culture. He's totally into youth group. But the guy who maybe isn't into that, we're eliminating that high testosterone, high achievement type guy. He's going out of church. So by the time we reach 18, we've pretty much eliminated most of the guys who would be more toward the typically manly side of the scale. You ask any 25-year-old Christian gal, what's the dating scene like in the church? And her face will fall, and she will tell you, there are almost no men left in the church. Young men that are dateable material, that have goals and have dreams, that understand that our mandate is to subdue the earth. There are all these guys who want to sit around and drink coffee, knit their own hats, and play in the worship band. And they're absolutely clueless. My daughters dated these guys. I was not impressed. So what we've done is we've screened out the guys with ambition, because we've screened out the guys who want to achieve things. We've screened out the guys with a modicum of testosterone. And what the saying is that the men in the church are like parking spaces. The good ones are either already taken or they're handicapped. So we've just, we don't have a problem now. We're going to have a gaping problem in about 30 years when these guys are asked to step up and lead in the church and they're not there. And we baptized this. Do you know we did it? In 1996, a guy by the name of Joshua Harris wrote a book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Yes.
Now, that book has done more to destroy the future of Christianity than any other book I can think of.
It ruined one of my relationships when I was single.
Yeah, absolutely.
It did.
Yeah. So for those of you who have not read this book, don't read the book.
I would.
Basically what it does, it sets such a high Old Testament bar on dating. Basically turned anything other than hand-holding into rape, right? And made a generation of Christians so afraid to date one another.
Right.
That Christians don't date each other anymore. If they're not going to date, how are they going to get married and have Christian kids?
Right.
And
so many, that book and that movement at the time instilled into a lot of women, and it comes out in the songs now that Jesus is my perfect lover.
Yeah.
Jesus is the lover that will never let me
Right.
down. He's my boyfriend. Well, there's two things wrong with that on the surface. One is that that's not who Jesus is, and that's not how you should be looking at him. Second is, me as a single man, if I want to date a woman, I'm competing with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I can't compete with Jesus.
Jesus never has bad breath. He's
Right.
never late. He never misses an anniversary. Yeah, he's
Exactly.
perfect. Right.
So how can I, as a man, compete with that? If you're dating Jesus now, I'm obviously not going.
You're not going to measure up.
Yeah, it's this thing where long ago, like you said, we're baptized, and that's a good way to put it. We baptized it long ago that spirituality, men just can't win.
Yeah.
And what I tried to tell them, I said, if men can't win, we won't play the game.
Yeah.
If we know we can't win, there's no sense in. We'll go somewhere else.
So yeah, we can't win in dating relationships. We can't win in church.
Right.
You know, where exactly are men winning?
Or they're winning online.
Or they're
in a
winning.
Virtual world.
They're winning in virtual worlds.
Yeah. And that's my big fear, is that in the future, as society keeps going this maternal way, and more and more will come against men, and there'll be more and more pressure on men to just either retreat into the video game and just check out.
The good news is churches are beginning to figure this out. The good news is Sunday school has become much more guy-friendly. Sunday school is becoming a much more kinetic experience. The Sunday school that my kids grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm from Alaska. We got rid of the classroom method, and now it's a much more kinetic, big room type experience. The boys love it. My grandsons go there now. They love it. Okay, so Sunday school is a huge win. The problem is when they go to youth group, because youth group used to be boy friendly, and now it's becoming girl and artistic boy friendly. So we're eliminating an entire class of boys, and the society follows the jock. What the jock does, the school does, right? What the jock does, the youth group does. And if the jock doesn't come to, God bless Fellowship of Christian Athletes and these organizations that are doing great work with jocks. But the problem is they're having problems integrating them into the local church, because the brand of spirituality we preach and what we demand that people do, the way we demand they worship, etc., is feminized. So, and then of course Sunday morning worship especially at the mega churches, is getting more and more man friendly. When you focus on men, your church grows. That's the thing. And then the next question, of course, is, well, if you focus on men, what happens to the women and the children? The women and children love it. Because the most important, the most attractive thing to a godly woman is a godly man. And when the men depart from the church, the glory departs with them. And the women don't want to go to those churches. They become ingrown, they become infighting. It's just a bunch of women providing hospice care to a dying congregation.
You guys touched on it earlier, the compromising of truth. When we over-feminize things, when we try to just everybody get along, you guys both said it, that truth is one of the first things and ultimate things to go by the wayside.
Well, let me put it this way. Women, generally older women, will sacrifice rules on the altar of relationships.
Okay.
Men will sacrifice relationships on the altar of rules. Right. Now, the reason it's so easy to slip into the feminized direction is because when Jesus came to the earth, he encountered a culture that was choking on rules. And he introduced grace. He introduced love. He introduced forgiveness. These are all more feminine attributes. And so what it's easy for us to do, it's easy for us to say, oh, Jesus was fighting against this overly masculinized, legalistic, rules-oriented, and we can follow that doctrine right over the edge of the table and fall right off into an equally bad heresy, which is sacrificing rules on the altar of relationships.
Well, and also, again, it goes back to what you were saying before on how do you define love? How do you find loving? And Dave, you've come up with the concept of father love versus mother love. It fits into your maternalistic, paternalistic. Mm-hmm. A lot of times following the rules is seen as not loving. Putting an expectation on people to obey God's commands is somehow not loving if you're not accepting. But Jesus didn't say that. Jesus said in John 15 alone, I think he said 9 different times, if you love me, you will obey my commandments.
Right.
Don't say you love me if you don't obey my commandments. And then when he did the Great Commission, or when he even prayed in the garden, he said, Father, make them one so the world will know that you sent me. So and then on the Great Commission, he said, go into all the world, preach the gospel, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you.
Yeah.
That's how you love Jesus. A lot of people think, oh, I just need to love Jesus just as an emotion or a
This
good
gooey feeling in my heart.
Gooey feeling. No, Jesus said that's not what I define as love. I define love as, my church says faith is trusting God enough to do what he says to do. That's what Jesus is asking of you, and that's what God is asking of you. So if we can break free of the more feminine concept of love being a positive emotion, love means everybody being nice to each other.
Affirming everything.
Affirming everything. But if we can get back to, if we're a loving congregation, if we're a loving church, that means that we are obeying what Jesus commanded us to do in how we treat each other and in how we relate to the world in preaching the gospel.
Yeah, men won't put up with a church with squishy rules. They
Right.
just won't, because, as I said, men will sacrifice relationship on the altar of rules.
And ultimately, a church with the squishy rules or society with squishy rules, where we're heading, is not a safe place.
No.
And women want to be safe above all.
Right.
So it's in the best interest of women to have their men be strong and to have their men be in leadership. And it's good for the men. Men need to see men up on stage in leadership. Even the guys that don't want to step out and lead, if they see a man, strong man, up leading, they'll follow.
They will.
So we don't sit here and sound just like three curmudgeons that are pointing fingers going, this is what's wrong with the church, this is what's wrong with the church. What are some baby steps that you've seen? I mean, you've been involved in a number of different churches and leadership. Dave, obviously, you go around the world advising. What are some steps that today's church leaders, when they look honestly in the mirror and they go, oh, we've got maybe not a dire problem today, but we definitely have a problem years from now because of the trajectory we're on. Sunday school classes, worship teams, overall attitude toward love. What are some things that you see that people need to do now, that they need to institute now in order to stop heading down that road?
Well, I think it starts, again, in your personal walk with God. Coming to grips with this as a man yourself, realizing I'm not measuring myself by this false measure I've been given, necessarily. Get into the Word and be obedient in your own life. And honestly, start praying for your church. Start praying for your church, for your family, for the community around you. And that can't help but naturally engage you. And put away fear. Put away the fear of making waves. Put away the fear of the criticism you're going to get if you step out in leadership as someone who leads or who wants to see, the rules followed, if you want to put it that way, or see truth and see a lot of what's happening is scary. It's scary in our society, and it's going to seep into our church. Well, that's a scary prospect. To have the church in the United States go, an apostate way or a way wrong, that's scary, because then where else is there in the world to go? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, realize this manly concept of, hey, I know the final score. I'm on the winning team.
One of the things, you focused on the spiritual, prayer, the word, et cetera, and those are very, very important. But what I would say is if a church wants to be more welcoming to men, the first thing I would do is say, go out and find some 22 to 30-year-old guys, and a wide variety of types, construction workers, bikers, whatever, right? Just regular IT guys, programmers, et cetera. And just have a men's night at your church and invite them to walk through your space and say, hey, what do you think of our space? Invite them to your church service and say, look, we're not going to try to convert you. We just want you to come to our church service and tell us, through the eyes of a young man, because we don't have many young men in here, what is it we could do better? How can you relate? Boy, those guys will give you a font of wisdom. And then have the courage to make the changes that are necessary to get that guy in the door and get him to stay long enough to hear the gospel, right? Because the problem is so many times guys come into church, their defenses are up, they don't hear the gospel. They're just like, when am I going to get out of here? When is that guy in the skinny jeans going to stop singing? When is this interminable sermon about the 10 Commandments going to be over? He's counting the minutes until he's out the door, right? But if you create an environment that engages him as a man, then he's not going to be counting the ceiling tiles. And if you can do that, your church will grow. And you'll see it in megachurch after megachurch after megachurch. The secret of the megachurches is not the hot band, it's not the praise guy with a goatee, it's not the pastor with the hot sermons. It's the fact that they've created an environment where men will stay long enough to hear the gospel.
Yeah, and I was speaking more personally, but as a church, I would also add the key, I think, is discipleship. And we've gotten so far away from that. And Dave, I know you and I were in that era in that generation where one-on-one discipleship was the thing. So again, it starts, I think, as a church, focus more, get your men engaged, get your those 20-something guys that come into your church. I keep telling my wife, you know, the thing that made me the man that I am today is the older men. When I was a knuckleheaded 20-something dummy.
You're still a knucklehead.
Well, yeah, but I'm just a more mature knucklehead right now. I said there were men, older men, that pulled me aside and said, Joel, this is how you follow God. This is how you treat a woman. This is how you study your Bible. This is how you do work, all that kind of thing. And I said, without those older men, I don't know. I don't know where I'd be.
I don't care if the Holy Spirit is alive in a church, the pastor can come out wearing lipstick and drag. And the men will stay.
And there's your quote.
God, it's all about God, right? But all things being equal,
right,
practical things do matter because you remove the distractions that cause men to sit there and think, when is this over?